Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to expose Ghislaine Maxwell's connections to the Clintons. Now, very, very few people covered what we're going to cover today. And so this is going to be new information for a lot of people. And it suggests that this went all the way to the top on both sides of the aisle. This is the true story here with Ghislaine Maxwell. We're also going to look into a project that she worked on and its possible connections to child trafficking. It had to deal with selling parts of the oceans, the high seas, they call it. Now, in case you didn't know, there are different laws that apply on the high seas, maritime law, secret laws that we don't even know about, in which these people are allowed to do certain things when they're not in and under the jurisdiction of countries. And literally, Ghislaine Maxwell was selling parts of the ocean, and I believe it was a cover for child trafficking. Now, before we get into it, a quick follow up on yesterday's show. We screened the 1978 sitcom Space Force. And then after that, we'll get into Ghislaine Maxwell and why she should never be trusted or let out of prison. But let's start with this follow up on yesterday's show. Now, many of you are paying attention. You were able to give really great input yesterday on the show. You added to it, which is what I always love when you guys add to the decode. That's why I do these decodes, so that you guys can help in this investigation, because that's what this is. We're trying to piece together lies, aren't we? And it's not a perfect science, but it's guided by the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit wants everything revealed. It's like a biblical promise that everything will be revealed. Nothing that is hidden will stay hidden in the last days. So I believe this is very, very important work. And basically, it's a two-pronged thing. It's where judgment happens. Once people are informed about the truth, that's when judgment happens, because when the lies are exposed, God will deal with people who ignore the lies. Now, there were two characters in the Space Force TV show. It was actually just a pilot. It never became a full show. There were two characters' names in that pilot associated with killers and assassinations. And many of you saw that and you're like, whoa, Hinckley and Berkowitz were both named in that pilot episode. And you're like, whoa, those, Hinckley was a guy who tried to assassinate Reagan, and Berkowitz was a serial killer. He was the son of Sam. And so you guys pieced that together. Now, the Berkowitz character makes sense. Here he is here. This is the son of Sam, David Berkowitz. Then he changed his name to Falco, and they caught him in 1977. So obviously, the sitcom had not happened yet when he got caught. So this one makes sense that they would have used his name in the sitcom, but the other character's name is the dead giveaway. Hinckley. Hinckley was mentioned. And check this out. This is the alleged, and I say alleged because all this is it's all just play, isn't it? This is Hinckley, John Hinckley Jr., and he did not allegedly attempt to assassinate Reagan until 1981, 3 years after the episode aired. So we got the names of two killers in this episode. So it tells you that this guy might not even be real, this Hinckley guy, if they're using his name as some kind of archetype, right? Now, this is crazy. Apparently, he tried to kill Reagan. I had no idea this was the case on my birthday, March 29th, which is weird. Apparently, this guy was also obsessed with Jodie Foster. But this is a little bit weird that they used his name, right? Here's the assassination attempt of Reagan, March 29th, 1981, 3 years after the episode aired. Now, I don't know if this guy came up in the news before the pilot episode, and so that's how they knew to use him, but I don't think so. Pretty crazy, guys. Now let's get into Ghislaine Maxwell. And look, I understand that some believe this whole thing is fake. And even if it was, we're not covering this stuff as fact. We're covering it from a perspective of how the story is programming the public's behavior. We're covering it from a perspective of also judgment. Because if we allow this to go and just dismiss it, that's judgment on the rest of us who aren't taking a spiritual stand to demand justice. And I believe this whole trafficking story is about absolving the controllers of sin. Because if people just let this go, what does that say? That says that they will continue on in their sin and it will get worse. One day they're going to be coming for your children. They're trying to get the public to be okay with all this. Now, before we get into these re-uploads from 5 years ago, in which we exposed all this, let's figure out what's going on in the news. She's now saying she won't testify before Congress without a pardon. So they're setting this whole thing up for a pardon. Trump will likely say, oh, well, I had to pardon her so we could find out the truth. And here's the real truth. It's the Democrats, right? Of course, she's going to say that so she can get her pardon. And whatever comes out, if this all goes through, will likely reshape politics in America. She might even be being used to actually destroy the Democrats and set up Trump's golden age where he's given complete power and control. I mean, he's already there, but this is getting insane. Now, if you hadn't heard, in the last 48 hours, she's been moved to a cush prison in Texas. It's basically not even a prison. It's like just hanging out. There might not even be real fences around this thing. And this comes across as some kind of reward for whatever she's already shared with investigators. So obviously Trump's behind this, making things a lot easier on her. And this whole thing is set up for her to be pardoned. Now, I never in my life thought we would come to this point, but this is it, you guys. Now, let's take a look at this 2020 decode from July 2020. And this is all about this organization that she set up in which she was selling parts of the sea. And I believe this was code for trafficking children across oceans. I've also got a video here of the Clintons' involvement in all of this. Let's take a look, you guys. Because these people see children as chickens. And of course, they're into harvesting. Right? Now, before we get into the show, understand there are many components to this story, and I don't believe for 1 second that the Justice Department arrested this woman for the reasons that they say that they did. If, in fact, she hadn't been arrested, because according to Snopes, the standard by which we should believe anything that is released in the media, the standard is that we have some kind of proof, right? You can't just make a statement without proof. So where's the proof? Now, if they show us proof, fine, we'll accept that. But to this point, we see no perp walk, we've seen no photographs, we've seen nothing. So I don't believe it. And the other component of this, the big white elephant in the room, everyone has seemed to have forgotten, is that there was a brand new release of flight logs the day before egg stains, yolk was splattered all over the inside of the cell. The flight logs showed Donald Trump confirmed riding on the LL Cool J Express. Now, here's the problem that I have with all of this, is that this should be the #1 priority of the Justice Department and the FBI and whoever else is involved in this debacle. There should be mass arrests. Hollywood. Producers. Actors. Judges. These are called the elite, and they're all involved in this. Want to make a statement about this? Stop rounding up the low-level criminals. Or if you do round up low-level criminals, get some intel on them to build your case against the higher-ups, because obviously many of these people are basically just people doing the work for the elite. Although in the case of Ghislaine, she was doing a lot of the dirty work herself, driving into trailer parks and things to find these girls and meeting them during these foundations and appearing to help children, but in actuality doing just the opposite. So, Ghislaine is the topic of today's show. We're going to get into this. I believe this whole thing is a cover-up, basically grabbing the people who they think have dirt that goes all the way to the top. Why do you think they sealed the records? Why do you think they sealed the records? Because the information was so damaging that it could undermine the security of the United States government. So why is that any different now? Here we are once again, and we have no actionable intelligence. We don't have mass roundups. We've got a couple people that know a lot. One's gone, and the other is now, we're told, in custody. And you think she doesn't have a dead man's trigger? Like almost every person with this kind of knowledge would have. It's like wearing a vest, a bulletproof vest, right? Let me check and make sure we're connected. We'll get into this short clip of Ghislaine addressing the United Nations. And it's really her. This is no joke. This isn't fake news. We're going to get into this in a second here. Thanks, everybody, for coming up to the show. Now, let me give you a little bit of backdrop to what's going on here. She was heavily involved in the UN. She was really pushing this program called the Terramar Project. Why was she pushing this program called the Terramar Project? Well, she basically wanted to sell you back your own oceans. This is her here. And she gives this little speech about how there's all this free ocean out in the world, and you can pay for it. You can pay for your own ocean. Like, basically, you know, what do they call that? You like give somebody money. They like sponsor the piece of ocean as if we really need to do it, right? And then they take all this money and do whatever they're going to do with it. To me, it sounded like a scam from the get-go. We actually had talked about this and decoded this on the other channel, the Terramar Project, long ago. We started the hashtag Arrest Ghislaine Now. And apparently, they're trying to show us that they're telling us that they did. But we'll see here in a second. Let's play a part of this. Now, I'm going to break this up, obviously.
Thank you.
Oh, that's loud.
Please.
I'll do my best. First of all, Your Excellencies, Presidents, Lords, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, let's get past all the...
I just would like to thank you so much, and it's such an honor to be here.
Who's this guy right here? I'd like to... Watch his face. See, all these people in this room, the very fact that she's sitting here, and they know, beyond the shadow of a doubt, most of these people in this room know what she's up to. Now, some people have offered the explanation that by somehow that this ocean idea that she had, piecing off and selling pieces of this ocean off, this had something to do with having command of seas and being able to have immunity from crimes, seas. Do you know that the LL Cool J Express was one of the only planes that could be opened mid-flight without decompressing? Which would infer that things could be thrown out of the plane mid-flight in vast stretches of the ocean outside of shipping lanes, where it could be eaten by sharks and all the evidence erased. Going with this. Now, I want to also be clear before we continue. At the time that Donald Trump flew on this plane, he knew that the plane was named after children that get hurt. One time is too many.
I'm here representing civil society. My passion for the ocean, for those of you, there's a slideshow going
Civil society, yeah.
up there, so you don't just have to hear me, you can see the pictures as well. Started when I was a little girl. I grew up watching Jacques Cousteau on TV and became mesmerized.
Whoa, started when she was a little girl. So you can hear clues in here in her speech here. Let's keep listening.
With the oceans, it led to me becoming a deep worker submersible pilot.
So many people understand that this would be training that a spy would need. There was also other stories of a guy that she dated that said that she actually was involved in a helicopter. She was flying a helicopter. She was involved in some kind of action down in South America. Okay. So she's admitting here that basically she's a trained spy.
And And ultimately, on one of my first dives, where I went down expecting to see a fish, I switched on the lights at the bottom of the ocean and saw a plastic hanger.
Plastic hanger is symbolic, and you can look into that. Hangers are hung on door handles to represent something. We'll get into that another.
It was in that moment, actually, that I decided that I really wanted to focus my attention on the ocean. And the area of the ocean that I chose to focus on was the high seas, which we've discussed so much here today.
Now, this goes all the way back to maritime, right? That's what this is about. Maritime law, high seas. The whole banking system is based off of this. Currency. That's why all of the banking terms are named after liquidation. Bank is the bank of a river. Current is currency, and it goes on and on and on and on. A lot of channels that have done work on uncovering law and banking system and how they control us. So the very fact that she's trying to apply donations and money to the high seas is significant. This is interesting. It's like the profile face here, neck here, hair tied up in a bun with body coming down here. Very bizarre. This looks like almost like a man's profile. Single woman. Never noticed that before. Let's keep going with this.
But for those of you who don't know, it represents 45% of our planet. And by the way, that 45% of the planet belongs to each and every one of you here, because it is our global commons. Under UNCLOS, it is ours. It belongs to each and every one of us. And
she tells us it belongs to each and every one of us. But when you go to the Terramar site, they ask you for money for that part that already belongs to you.
Assets belong to us too. And I didn't know that when I started the history. The history of this started in 533 AD under Emperor Justinius, whips through the Magna Carta. Of course, I have to give a nod to England.
So there you heard the Justinian comment. Now, this fits into exactly everything we've been talking about Justinian, and it just so happens to be 533 AD. And also, Justinian was basically the protege or sun worshipper emperor who followed in Apollo's footsteps, as well as Janus, who faced God. See where all this is headed. All goes back to sun worship. Now, let's keep listening here.
And then ends up in 1982 at the Law of the Sea Convention.
Now, 1982 is a really important year because it also follows the 19-year Metonic cycle. And we're going to cover that on Monday. Because what I found was that this year, 2020, I wish I could cover this like actually. Give you a little. 2020, I want you to look at the eclipses listed. June 21st, December 14th. Now we're going to go 19 years before that to 2001. And behold, the same exact dates of the eclipses. The summer solstice in December 14th. Now, this is very important because this is sun worship. Because 19 years before that, in 1982, you just heard her mention, 1982, we had the same eclipses. A few more added. June 21st, summer solstice eclipse, December 15th. Now, on this June 21st date, Prince William was born on the Apollo. Apologies for the sound cutting out, you guys. We're trying to figure out our mic settings. Back then it was clipping off. Hopefully you can hear the majority of what I'm talking about here. In this particular section, I'm talking about the 19-year cycle, Metonic cycle of solar and lunar eclipses that happen on almost the same exact day every 19 years. And we'll get into way more detail on that on Monday. These are what are called the 19-year Metonic cycles. They are very important, especially when you have a lunar and solar conjunction. This is when they like to have their boogeyman, right? This year's boogeyman was CV. 19 years ago, it was 119. Backwards was the boogeyman. 19 years before that was 1982. And guess who the boogeyman was then? The Unabomber. There's always a boogeyman every 19 years. Now, let's keep going with what we're talking about, because she actually mentions chickens.
This area, our commons, are under peril for many reasons. One of the areas that of interest that I'm sure many of you are aware of is the shrinking ice at the.
So here we go with the fear, right? We need someone to manage all this. Just give us a little bit of money, more taxes. We'll be able to manage this and save the world, right?
Arctic. This is an Arctic map, and you can see the little white bits, which are the high seas areas that will remain. The ice is melting, the northern passage is opening. This will just be one of the areas that need to be discussed. And
now,
Notice how great this all sounds. Like if you're some kind of like leftist liberal, you're just eating this up right now. Let's say you didn't know anything about Ghislaine, right? And you're watching this. This is great. I think everyone should be involved. You should have seen how many people on the Terramar website actually donated money. Lots and lots of people. They raised lots of money. People are eating this up. This just goes to show that no matter how good somebody sounds on this elite level, that they can be corrupt. Obviously, there's a lot of proof against this one. So this should tell you something about the elite. It doesn't matter what they're saying. Okay? If it looks like a duck, it's probably a duck.
Focused on in the time to come. What's the point of the? Why should we really care about the ocean? So 90 million tons of fish caught a year, and about a third of the fish harvested are used to feed livestock. What that means is we're feeding that to our chickens so that they can taste more like fish.
What does that even mean? Like, that's retarded. Feeding fish to our chickens so they can taste like fish? There's some coding going on there. I can't quite put my finger on it. But there's something going on here, because what does she care about what happens to the fish? Now, here's the other thing that I have to say about this whole fishing thing. Because most people who fish are not doing this. They're not in these giant boats collecting tons and tons. Shame on these people. I understand it supports an industry, but this is not normal. Catching all these fish at one time from the ocean. And that's not our fault. These are corporate interests. A lot of these elite are invested in these massive shipping companies. 2,000 years ago, they didn't have ships this big who caught this many fish out of the ocean. This is because of technology and advancement that they're able to do this. And then they want to blame us for die-offs and lack of fish in the ocean, and blame the guy with one boat, $100 just to drive his car 4 hours, when they have absolutely nothing to do. A multi-million-dollar boat like this, and drag all these fish out with some kind of investors behind. All right? Now you're starting to see the problem. All these rules, it has nothing to do with saving the earth. Maybe I'll just comply. Where all this is headed, we're at a critical time in history. We either stand up now to the lies and demand change peacefully, all the way to the top. There needs to be a complete renovation of all these governments of the world. Complete renovation, and stop believing the right left lie. Because if there was something to be done and a candidate really wanted to do the
Fast forward
Arctic
here.
full with fish again, because there is be your question and paste it back. When I come back in, we'll do a quick question and answer session, because it's going to be one of our shorter. I think that's a reference to like chicken tasting like fish. I think that's a sexual reference. I want my honesty. Those that have minds to think and know what that's probably.
Like fish. Unsustainable fishing practices. This is just an example of that. We're so clever as a species that we have advances in extractive technologies. This is the sort of map, if you or picture, if you will, of one of the largest fishing nets in the world that can.
So that's the fishing net, and here's the funny thing. Okay, this is the firmament. They know it. What is the 12? See, this is all a joke to these people. They're all laughing and snickering at each other, going, ha ha ha. Firmament. They're like each other with their elbow and each other, going laughing. Watch. Wait. What do you see this guy's face?
Contain 12 Boeing 747s, which is pretty big. The World Bank quotes, poor ocean management leads to approximately $50 billion in lost revenue annually.
Because what happens is, now look, what she's saying here is actually like true, but it's never going to change. And along with this, she's dovetailing this into more control. We don't need more control. We need them to stop funding corporate fishing like this. That you can't. Well, thing happens. All the fish start reproducing, and then there's a bunch of fish in the ocean. And then little guys with 20-foot boats can go out and catch local fish.
It's $7 million. And I want to come to Palau, actually. As Karen said, 100 million sharks are taken out of the ocean, have their fins cut off, and for fins very brilliantly close their waters to shark finning, and ultimately $200 per fin into something worth through tourism. The use of our oceans, not only for the oxygen and the food, but also there has to be a link between industry and the people. Sustainable ocean, because without money at the bottom and without it's not going to work. So I started the Terramar project.
Here we go, the Terramar project. I love it. Now, I think the site has been taken down. TerramarProject. after all this hit, she got implicated, pulled this down pretty quickly. Now, there's more to this story because in our research, we found one of her victims. And we went to her website and found information on this girl who's now a woman. And in real time, as I was researching this website, it was pulled from before my eyes, right from my browser. Then I got a weird private message on Twitter from someone from the Justice Department who had been monitoring our channel and said, look, we understand that you found this girl, but she's in protective custody where she's being questioned to find out exactly what she knows. And we could either do this the easy way, you can pull your video down, or we could do this the hard way. And what I'll do is in the community tab, I'll pull up that guy's message and screenshot it so you guys can see what was sent to me. It looked very official, the way he was talking to me, right? It wasn't just some hoax or fly-by-night scammer. And that dovetailed with how it was pulled from my browser almost in real time, and I could no longer find these images of this girl. It told me something. So, you see what I'm saying? There's all this information coming out, and they're looking at it, but yet they're not finding new perpetrators. They're trying to make us believe that it was only Ghislaine, Gizzard Lane, and Eggstain. And this went way beyond that. Way beyond that. In fact, the most entries in his black book was the Trump family. Ivanka, Ivana, his sons, there were numbers and numbers and numbers for the entire family. He had the most entries of any of the people in the black book, which tells you that this went far beyond. This was a family thing. It wasn't even just Trump. Why would he have a phone number for Ivanka and Ivana and the sons? Why would he have all those phone numbers in the black book unless they were all involved? You see what's happening now. This is a cover-up. And it's a bait and switch because, yeah, these arrests are happening, but on the lower level. So he's going, hey, look, I'm doing something over here. Look over here, but don't look over there. And the presidency will end, or he'll get reelected. And no one will get arrested. Look, this could be a slam dunk for him. All he'd have to do is arrest Hillary and Bill. They must have proof on those two. Are you starting to see the cover-up here? But look, he could win a lot of points with people on the right if he would just go. I wouldn't believe him still if he arrested Bill because I would know that she would never see jail time, and her sentence would be commuted probably with the next Democrat president. So I wouldn't even really believe that. That to me would be more smoke and mirrors. There needs to be dozens of people being arrested. This is huge, huge. And they're trying to say, oh, because of the CV, the process just takes too long. No, it doesn't. You gotta get on this. This has been going on for years. It went on for years even before Trump was elected. And during the Obama presidency, all going on, people were talking about this. Nothing was ever done. They were trying to cover it up. Otherwise, they would have done something about this a long time ago. Now, each and every one of you stayed on the story should be proud of yourself, because through us keeping this alive in the news, the victims were more forthright in coming forward. You see what I mean? If this was never in the news, the victims might be afraid to come forward. But they know there's a lot of people that want to know the truth. Should be still the number one story in the truth, because we can actually do something about it if we keep talking about it. Whereas other things, we might not have enough momentum or evidence or this or that. But we have evidence with this. There are victims. So, here we are, the Terramar Project.
And the point of the Terramar project is to connect each and every one of us to our global oceans, to the high seas, because it does belong to you. We give you a passport, a daily online newspaper, an education platform.
That's important, a passport. What are they threatening now? Look, we can't even travel now because of this whole CV thing.
A government structure and a way to connect to your oceans as you never have been able to before. Fish do not vote, but we do. And if we do, and we tell our politicians that we want the oceans to become sustainable, then...
See how they're dovetailing this into sustainability, which basically means more rules, not just for the corporate fishermen, but for everybody. Okay? Now all of a sudden you can't catch that fish and eat it anymore. You can look at it and scuba dive, but you can't eat it. Now, this is interesting because this almost... Look at this. This is crazy. The I am walking on water. This is Antichrist right here. This is like depicting 3, that's 33. Remember she said Justinian in 533? Waves, And 3 down. That's 33.
The goal is to have every politician end up with a policy framework and a decision on how they treat the oceans, and hopefully that will be sustainable, because that is what we, the people, want. A sustainable development goal at the UN is,
This guy's name is Sack.
I think, a fantastic thing. The United Nations is absolutely the right place to lead this.
Look at that. That to me looks like trafficking. All these children's hands across the world. Look where this finger is here.
Whoa.
That's pointing to St. James. Right there. Haiti. Look, it's a black hand too. Haiti and the whole Clinton Foundation thing. This is how they nod to each other. Little things go right over most people's heads. So if Bill and Hillary were looking at this, they'd be like laughing.
Whoa.
See this? What's happening here?
They are the only place that has this global reach. All the people can come together to create this goal that will then be the planetary mandate for the next 15 years of how we...
I don't like that word mandate. Now this was posted in 2014. This is relatively recent.
Treat our oceans. So I really want the people, each and every one of us, 7 billion of us on the planet, to come together, to sign up, to get your passport, to make your voice heard, so that the UN and each ambassador can hear what's what we want, and all politicians know that no sustainable ocean means we won't vote them back into power. If we won't vote them back into the power, then they're out.
I think that's about it, you guys.
Okay, I got one more for you guys. Sound should be much better on this one. Apologies for that. This one is about the Ghislaine Maxwell Clinton Foundation collaboration. This was a decade after the Epstein investigation.
It's going to be all about Jeezy's work with the Clintons. Yes, her work with the Clintons. Now, the irony of what I'm about to show you on the Clinton Foundation website, and I'll link all this in the pinned comment, they were so stupid they didn't even take it down. You would think that they would take this down, right? But they have not. So we're going to cover it today. And the irony of this is that the meeting was all about empowering women and children. I mean, how sick is that? And then after we cover this, we're going to dig into the Jeezy Q connection with JFK Jr. Now, this is stunning information that, again, we had covered a while back. We found this link to JFK Jr. and right before his death, with GZ. We'll get into that later in the show as well. So what is this all about? Well, GZ's Terramar project, which you'll remember was a segue into the UN world domination over all resources, right? She went to speak before the UN and presented this Terramar project. And it basically was going to segue into their sustainability goals, right? And anyone who's doing that, anyone who has any kinds of projects and plans, UN wants to hear about it, because they're going to implement that into their program to basically take away your right to enjoy your planet under the guise of sustainability, right? So her little Terramar project was starting to pick up some steam.
Now I'm going to interrupt myself here, because we showed the connection way back then of Donald Trump to Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell. Here he is on the yacht with known Mossad agents. This was 1987. See, you guys, we're forgetting all this. This is huge. Here's the story. It says one thing about the party aboard British media mogul Robert Maxwell's yacht. Everybody but everybody had to doff their shoes before boarding the plush carpeted Lady Ghislaine, which is, he named his yacht after his daughter. Maxwell insisted, and his guests cooperated, including Donald Trump, who has a much bigger yacht, and was happy to compare them to Maxwell. So this is why Trump wished her well. I believe Trump was at the top of this operation. There's Mossad once again. Unbelievable, you guys. And now here we are, and he's about to pardon her. Let's keep watching here. It's almost over.
And it was noticed by the Clinton Foundation, and they added her as part of their Sustainability Oceans Alliance nonsense. Here it is right here. This is the Clinton website. ClintonFoundation.org, Clinton Global Initiative. This was back in 2013. Let's read through this. Commitment by the Terramar Project. Now, just so you understand, former presidents don't team up with just anybody. They vet these people, they investigate, or they're just simply friends with these people or in business with them to some degree. They don't just randomly pick people that they want to do projects with. There's something going on here, and you're going to see it with your own eyes and hear it. In 2013, the Sustainable Oceans Alliance committed to mobilize the international community and the public at large on the importance of the oceans and seas, and ensure that the 193 member states of the United Nations recognize and incorporate oceans in the Sustainable Development Goals. So she was the one that was going to be in charge of the oceans, right? And these were the goals that they had in 2015. This was even before Agenda 2020 and 2030. This was 2015. Now, to put this in perspective, this happened 10 years almost after the egg stain initial investigation. It happened in like 2004, I think it was. This was a full 10 years after that. So this guy was already outed for what he did, and yet the Clintons still chose to work with him or them, right? This two-pronged approach will mobilize member states of the United Nations to include oceans in the SDGs, and the global campaign will engage citizens around the world. So that's what it's about. Here's the approach. Terramar Project, the Sustainable Oceans Alliance and the Terramar Project are committed to ensuring that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals protect the world's oceans. That you guys, this is a big deal. Okay, this is a really big deal because a lot of the traffic of these children occurs in the air and on the sea. So no doubt there was some protections that they were looking for to lay cover for this kind of activity. In fact, it's the only way to do it these days because they can't get caught. Many of these planes can be open midair without decompressing. Things can be thrown out from them. Okay, make no mistake. There's something to this. Having control of the high seas, taking you out of the loop of your own God-given right to enjoy the water and the oceans, fish from it, do whatever you want, right? That doesn't belong to anybody. So let's keep reading because it goes on to talk about development of those people whose food, jobs, and culture rely on their vitality. The organizations have identified 3 pathways to implementation: diplomacy, academia, and public relations. Experts will spearhead the effort along each pathway. And then down here, they mention GZ. This is unbelievable. Let's scroll down here and find her name. There she is. Leading the academic pathways, Professor Michael Dorsey. Now, this Michael Dorsey character, I looked into this guy. Now, he's not in the flight logs or the manifest or anything, but no doubt he's mentioned several times alongside GZ. So this guy needs to be investigated because obviously he was standing around this woman many times, working together here with her on this Terramar project. He knows things, and the State Department and wherever else, FBI, CIA, they should be investigating this guy too for what he knows about all of this. This was right in the thick of it. This Terramar project was just on the heels. Now, they may have quieted things down a bit because Eggstein had already gotten drug in, remember? But no doubt this guy knows something, because why would he work with her unless he knew something? He knew her history with Eggstein. He knew all about it, but yet he still chose to work with her. There's something weird going on. Look, the way you have to look at history is you have to look at associations, you have to look at events, and that's the only way you're going to get down to the truth, because people like to rewrite history. They like to change what history was really, what really happened in history. They like to speak from 2 sides of their mouth. Everyone goes on and on about, oh, Trump cooperated with the FBI, and then he kicked Eggstein out of Mar-a-Lago. You guys, criminals distance themselves from other criminals all the time, especially if they know that they're getting heat. They know if that other criminal is going to get heat or going to get taken down if they get tipped off. Yeah, you would kick somebody out of Mar-a-Lago to start to distance yourself. But I'm going to show you real history. And if you look in the left part of the frame, you'll see the history that Trump knew the Maxwells for decades. He knew GZ's father. He was on the yacht with them, with a bunch of other people, Mossad agents. So you're telling me that an entire decade went by and Cindy McCain knew, but you didn't? What he was up to? Cindy McCain knew, but you didn't? Of course he knew. Cindy McCain says we all knew. And if he didn't know, well, then he's not as smart as everyone thinks he is. You guys, before billionaires hang out with people, they vet them. They have public relations people. They go in and investigate who they're going to be around, who they choose as their friends. They just don't pick up some fly-by-night billionaire living down in the Keys with his own private island. He was checked out thoroughly before he ever talked to him on the phone the very first time. You would have to be stupid to believe that Trump had no idea what this guy was into. For 10 years. Starting in 1989 and probably before that, because he was already invited on her father's yacht. And it went on for a decade and a half. You can't tell me there was no indication of what was going on. Now, we're talking about the Clintons here, equally and probably even more guilty. But all these people are guilty. This is what I'm trying to get you to understand. They were all involved. And until you come to that realization and conclusion, you will always be deceived by these people on the right and the left. So they mentioned Glaine's name here, right? Leading the public-facing side is I said her name, GZ, Terramar's founder and director. TM is building the first global sustainable community around oceans and the global commons. 45% of the ocean that lies outside of any single country's jurisdiction. Okay, so this is what they're doing. They're making all these pledges. Here is where things get really creepy. Because all of this came out under President Clinton. Former Secretary Clinton and Chelsea unveiled new commitments to action on the second day of 2013 Clinton Global Initiative annual meeting. This was their annual meeting. Now watch this. This was all about empowering women and children. And right there, mobilizing youth, women's empowerment, conserving natural resources. This was the meeting, September 25th, 2013.
Wow, mobilizing youth. That's code for child trafficking.
I wonder if there's any pictures. Anyone can find pictures from this meeting with GZ and the Clintons all hanging out with her and her Terramar project. During the second day of the 2013 Global Initiative meeting, all the Clintons got together to discuss commitments to action that will address pressing global challenges, which is just code for let's control everybody. Look, I can understand if you want to make a global commitment to saving some kind of environment, maybe because by person level, fumes and raking all the oceans. We're not the ones doing that. Women and girls, that's just weird. Women and girls still comprise the majority of the world's unhealthy, unfed, and unpaid, marginalized in so many ways. Now, don't get this twisted. The Clintons definitely vetted out GZ. They wouldn't have worked with her on this. They already knew that her boyfriend was investigated. Yet they still chose hypocrisy of having her as part of this while claiming to help girls. We've built an architectural structure of laws and norms to protect women's rights. Well, you might want to start with the 14-year-old girl's rights. Let's start there. But 2015 will mark 20 years since that conference in Beijing calling for the full and equal participation of women, blah, blah, blah. Now it keeps going down here, and they don't list her in this one, but they list the Terramar project. Sustainable Oceans Alliance. Commitment by the Terramar project, and of course that is GZ's. Look at this, they don't even put her in the partners list. In 2013, the Terramar project committed to launch the Sustainable Oceans Alliance, SOA. And here were some of the other projects. Okay. Now, here's the way this all works. Look at this. Island conservation and sustainable livelihoods for women. The hypocrisy of this. Women in oceans. Now, again, if the Clintons didn't know, then shame on them. You're supposed to vet these people, right? Now, you're going to remember that GZ's Terramar project was all about selling us back pieces of our own ocean that virtually nobody could ever visit, and ironically, even have access to. Why? Because they're going to put limits on all this stuff of what you can take out of the ocean and who can take out of the ocean. And you have to have a permit, and you have to have this, and you have to have that. Right? You can't just freely go and take a boat somewhere and pull up. They say we own these oceans, right? But yet we don't. It's doublespeak. Now, she had already raised millions for this project. And this was before her associations with Eggstein were exposed and the victims started coming forward. Now, remember, Trump, just last night, wished this woman the best when he was asked about her in his speech. What was that all about? Now, as you just saw, we covered this whole thing with the Clintons and the Terramar project. You noticed all the doublespeak when it comes to children. It was all doublespeak. They say they're empowering youth, yet we know for a fact that both the Clintons, GZ, and even Trump flew on a plane that they knew was named after the exploitation of these very children. And yes, one time on that plane is too many when you already know the name of the plane. You think billionaires don't check other billionaires out before they go flying on their planes? Or letting them fly on their planes? Which is what we already know happened. So, Cindy McCain knew. You haven't heard much from her lately, have you? This is back in January 2020. Wonder what happened to her. Probably switched her out with her clone because she had a clone malfunction. And just like that other woman that says, we all knew. Well, this is a we all knew moment. And we haven't heard anything from Cindy McCain. Now, I've heard the Q community go on and on about JFK Jr. and how he's going to make some kind of miraculous appearance, right? At any moment, we're all just waiting. It's going to happen any moment. Q is JFK Jr. Now, people argue, they're like, the official Q site doesn't say that. You guys, there's an entire community based around Q. And even though the quote-unquote official site might not say it, there are millions of people reading into what Q is saying. And they are reading into that Q is saying JFK Jr. is coming back. And the Q site is intentionally ambiguous so that people do read into it all these things. That's the problem with it. That's the problem with it. Well, there is a Q, GZ, JFK connection that very few of you know about. Check out this article from 20 years ago, almost on 322, but it was actually 323. And they mentioned GZ in here. They mentioned JFK Jr. The article is New York Post titled, How GZ Rose from the Ashes. Maxwell's heirs are building a new business empire. This is crazy. Now, I had no idea until I discovered this probably, how long ago was this? I think probably like last year or something we uncovered this. And let's go in here. Let's find where it just talks about this. So it's talking about her dad, right? Robert with the yacht. Maxwell even dreamed that he might one day forge an alliance. This is where his dreams for his daughter with the Kennedys by marrying GZ to JFK Jr. The two became, let me blow this up. Let me make this bigger. This is very important. The two became close friends in GZ and remained so until his tragic death last year. GZ has also been a guest at a number of Kennedy weddings and family events. Now, there's much more to this article, and some of you that are researchers might be able to pull other things out of this, but I wanted to focus on this part right here because that's weird. JFK Jr. was happily married and in love on that plane with his wife. And here we have this mystery woman who was close friends with him just before he kicked the bucket. And her father wanted to marry her into the Kennedys. This is weird. And maybe this was some kind of a love triangle. Was she jealous? Was she rejected by JFK Jr.? And she decided to somehow arrange for what happened to him? I don't know. But the plot thickens, does it not? And this ties right in to the very core and foundation and basis of the Q JFK connection, which everyone's going on and on about the deep state and how Trump's going to take it down. This is just bizarre. Another connection to Trump. So I guess we're going to have to wait till JFK Jr. comes back and explains all this to us. Of course, I'm being sarcastic. So that's what I wanted to show you guys today.
All right, we're back in 2025. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Hopefully we can draw some clues out of that. The JFK Jr. love triangle with Ghislaine Maxwell, the Q connections. Of course, now we have RFK Jr. running our health under Trump. Trump continues to stay close to the JFK family, almost mimicking the assassination attempt on the same side of the face that JFK got shot in with the near, except Trump survives it miraculously. You know, we've got all these weird connections, and then this Terramar project, the high seas for women and children, even though they were trafficking the women and children during this exact time frame in history. We've got the connection to the Clinton Foundation. We've got Trump, the connection to Trump. You guys, there's much, much more to this story. And for them to sweep this all under the rug and pretend like nothing happened is insane. Insane. So I'm back in the chat. We're back in 2025. Yes, Q is a trap. It always was. So is MAGA. Always was. So Trump said Q loves him. Exactly. Q and MAGA helped get Trump elected, put everybody to sleep. They recycled old conspiracy theories that were already well established, stuff people had already exposed, and they brought it up and as if it was brand new information, which of course garnered them a bunch of people because they allowed Q to go mainstream truth. And so all these people, instead of seeing the real truth, they fell under the Q spell and the MAGA spell, and the rest is history. So again, I apologize for the sound on that first video, but hopefully you could get the gist of it. Yes, Q was the false hope. Exactly. All right. Q was banned. You stayed on YouTube. They did that on purpose. That's called a controlled demolition. When they're done with the PSYOP, they erase the PSYOP. That way everyone forgets all the Q promises and all that stuff, right? That never, ever, ever happened. It's like every week they were making a new promise called a controlled demolition. The reason why we've stayed on YouTube is because we're very careful. As you can hear on those previous videos, we were using coded language because the censorship was super high at the end of Trump's presidency in 2020. You couldn't say Ghislaine Maxwell. You couldn't say anything back then, which was really weird. And that was the first clue that I had that something was up. So yeah, this is what they do. They build something and then they control demolition. They destroy it. So there's no evidence left. We've seen this with the Twin Towers, turned into dust, carted it all off to China. We saw it with Handy Sook. They did the same thing. They demolished it, turned it into dust. They did the same thing with Eggstein's mansion, his old Palm Beach mansion, turned it into dust. They erased the evidence. So, great question. What else is going on, you guys? Well, thanks for showing up. I guess I'm going to pop off of here. I will see you guys likely tomorrow. Much love to everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.